Welcome to Doing Well with Diabetes, a collaboration between the International Diabetes Federation and the Diabetics Doing Things podcast. I'm your host, Rob Howe. Doing Well with Diabetes is a series interviewing athletes living with diabetes from around the globe to help inspire the next generation of athletes with diabetes to continue to work towards their dreams while doing well with diabetes. Doing Well with Diabetes is part of the Kids and Diabetes in Schools program from the International Diabetes Federation and is supported by Sanofi and ISBAD. Diabetics Doing Things has donated all production and promotion in kind. To learn more about the KIDS program, visit kids.idf.org. And to hear more from Diabetics Doing Things, visit diabeticsdoingthings.com/subscribe. Now give it up for our next guest on Doing Well with Diabetes. Hello and welcome back. This is part of our collaboration series between the International Diabetes Federation and Diabetics Doing Things. This is a podcast called Doing Well with Diabetes as part of our Doing Well with Diabetes series. And I'm very, very excited to introduce our special guest today. Stephanie Ratcliffe is one of the few people who have been able to represent their country in the Olympic Games living with type 1 diabetes. But not only that, she is a hammer athlete as a track and field athlete at the University of Georgia and previously graduated from Harvard University with a degree in neuroscience. So she is really a person with type 1 diabetes doing things. Steffi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So excited to be here.
It's very exciting to have you. And we were chatting a little bit before we hit record. You've been living with diabetes for almost 17 years. So I want to ask you kind of two questions. Like, what do you remember about the early days? And also, where are you from? And then also, you're starting to getting comfortable being more outward about your story of your life with diabetes. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I was diagnosed at 6, which is obviously quite young. I personally don't really remember life without diabetes. It's always been a part of who I am, what I have. And my diagnosis is actually, the memories are a bit patchy, of course. Like, I was super young, but I was lucky. I caught it super early. I went to the GP, the doctors, and they said, go to the hospital. There, you have diabetes. I was in there for a few days, and like, those first few days were a lot, just from the little bits I remember, from what my parents told me. I was absolutely petrified of needles, like so scared. And my mom actually told me like she had to hold me down, and nurses had to hold me down for that first injection. And like, I think my parents were absolutely mortified when they heard like, this is going to be an everyday thing now. This is my life. Another thing that comes to mind that I really struggled with was hypo food. I didn't like lollies or candy. I didn't like chocolate. So trying to get me to eat something when I was low was a bit of a feat. The only thing I ate was sourworms. That was it, just one thing. So yeah, there was obviously like a few difficult things getting diagnosed. And honestly, I think the big picture stuff might have been a bit more scary for my parents and those around me than myself. Like, we're so young, you don't really realize all the complications that can happen one day until you're older. Like, you're kind of sheltered from that. But no, I'm very thankful for the people I had around me to get me through that. And like, to this day, they're my biggest supporters, my family. So forever thankful for them. And I guess one thing that I was told very early on, which I think has kind of changed the way I go about life with diabetes, is that I was told, I can't remember who told me, and I don't even know if this is actually true, but someone told me that there's only 3 things that I wouldn't be able to do with type 1 diabetes. It was to be an astronaut, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't want to be an astronaut anyway. It was to scuba dive. I'm like, fine, I can live without that. And to be a pilot. But someone had actually already been a pilot. So I'm like, it never really crossed my mind that type 1 would ever stop me from anything. And I know that's not the case for everyone, but for me, I never had to consciously decide whether to pursue a dream or not pursue a dream because of type 1. So I'm also very fortunate in that regard. And then back to just like getting more involved with type 1 and the type 1 community as an athlete, as an older person now. Growing up, I always kind of tried to hide my type 1. I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want anyone to see my CGM, see my pump. And so kind of crossing that barrier to being proud to being diabetic, being thankful and positive for all the lessons that it's taught me, is a really huge step, and it's an exciting one. Like, there's this amazing community out there. And I'm like, if I can help just one other person, one other girl, one other boy to go and achieve their dreams, or just be proud to be type 1 diabetic, to not be embarrassed of it, then like, I've done my job then. So yeah.
Well, it's amazing, and you really are an inspiration to myself and many others living with diabetes. And I think having the courage to share your story happens at different times for everyone. I used to think like as I've been doing these podcasts now for almost 10 years, I've said like everyone's diagnosed twice, like once when the doctor tells you, and then once when you make it part of your identity and you really accept that responsibility of kind of advocating for yourself and others. And you do that in a huge way. And I also want to go back to those things you said. It may not be true. I know that there are people who aren't necessarily astronauts yet, but they work for NASA, and that a CGM has recently gone to space. So we may be approaching like the first type 1 astronaut. And I know certainly that there are a lot of people with diabetes who are certified in scuba, and we've had many of those pilots with type 1 on the show. So that list is rapidly getting checked off. So pretty fun.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's very exciting, and the opportunities are endless, type 1 or not. So
Absolutely. And I think, just to focus in on that, like you said, diabetes, there are some things, and for some people, diabetes can stop us from chasing some of the dreams that we have. But for you, you are one of the very few Olympians with T1D. So summer 2024, Paris Olympics. What did it mean for you to be able to put on that Australian jersey and then participate with your team? And now I was doing my research for the show. All the Australian national teams have like different names. So
yeah,
I think the track and field team are the Flames. Is that right?
I don't think we actually have a name for the track and field team, Australian track and field.
Awesome. So for you, like putting on that jersey, getting to walk under the flag, like at the highest level of your sport, like what was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, being an Olympian has been my childhood dream, like since I first started sports, like since I was 5 years old. I think it's a lot of people's dreams, actually. And like, I guess at the start, you never really think can become a reality. Yeah, you dream about it. So actually, like making that team, I definitely had like a pretty stressful year with injuries. So definitely doubted that whether it was even possible to make that team. So that definitely made the reward even more like just enjoyable and that moment even more special after everything. I think like representing your country, representing Australia, wearing that green and gold uniform, like that's why we do this sport. Like that's why we love it so much. It's the biggest honor, and it's why we train every day. I think that competing on that world stage, whether it's Olympics, whether it's Worlds, Commonwealth Games, whatever major championships it is, like that's not only an opportunity to strive for and achieve success in our sport, but it's also an opportunity to inspire other people to go after their dream. For me, a big part of that is reaching that type 1 community specifically, whether it's a kid wanting to pursue sport or go to a university or travel the world or someone newly diagnosed or just anyone at any point of life. Just if you have a dream, like you can never dream too big, just go for it. So it definitely, the whole experience meant so much for me on so many levels.
Well, it was certainly exciting to watch you, and again, like keeping an eye on all of the articles that came out about people with type 1 diabetes from all over the world competing at the highest level. I think you had a lot of fans from a lot of different countries just because you're in that type 1 community. But you're not just an Olympian. I think you are obviously a very multifaceted person, and you kind of also have a like a type A personality. Does that sound right? Like that you very go
Oh,
for it,
yeah.
see it, and go for it, which I find a lot of people with diabetes actually kind of develop as well. But you recently graduated from Harvard with a degree in neuroscience, and you're currently a graduate student at the University of Georgia. You got to go dogs. So how do you balance all of that with the Olympics and with diabetes? Like, how do you find balance?
Yeah, honestly, sometimes I don't even know how I do it. Definitely very busy, sometimes pretty stressful, but I guess that's just life, no matter what you're doing. Then sometimes you go through phases where like you kind of lighten up on something, like you have a break between semesters or you're having a little time off training. And like I step back and think like, how on earth did I fit everything in at once? Like when I was trying to give 100 to everything, like so but I mean, for me, some big things that I like to do is I schedule, I make a lot of lists, and I prioritize. Like, absolutely love making lists. Like, I just write everything down, and then I have to go through and prioritize. Okay, what comes first? Obviously, there's non-negotiables. You've got your classes, you've got your practice times. Like, I can't move them; they're set. And then next most important for me is my health. Like sleep comes next. Like no matter what's going on, I have to sleep. I have to eat well. I have to drink water. Just like look after my diabetes. Just like minimum life requirements. And then becomes the real battle. It's like, I think for me, usually I kind of prioritize track side of things at this stage of my life. I'm making sure I'm getting all that rehab, treatment, any extra stuff for track, and then I fit my study around that. But there are also times where I have a big exam, I have a big assignment that like that has to take priority. So it really comes down to just being super flexible, being adaptable, being willing to change that schedule to just adapt to what's there. And I guess, like you mentioned, type A personality, that's me to a T. So I'm trying to be perfect at everything all the time. And it's like, it got to a stage where this got really stressful. I put myself under a lot of pressure, just like from myself, not even from everyone else. And it just like, I just wasn't happy. It gets a lot sometimes. And I was talking to someone and they told me it's like, well, you're trying to give 100% to track and you're trying to give 100% to school, like that doesn't work. You've only got 100% to give to everything in the first place. So that kind of helped me accept that we are human. We're not robots. Like we can't be perfect at everything. Like that's just not realistic as much as we want it to be. And I really learned just to be kind to myself in those times, that I have to take time to fill up my own cup, do some things just for me, not for sport, not for school, but just to make me happy so I can keep being as productive as possible in all parts of my life. So
That's great advice and like great wisdom for someone as young as you as well. Only being 23 and being able to have that perspective, I think is really important. Especially, I joke I'm a real psycho about just getting stuff done. I love, I try to do my best in everything, and I kind of joke about being a recovering overachiever. But I love lists too. I use Notion for like everything, like every if I can write it down, I can manage it. Like what gets measured gets managed, and I'm a huge believer in if you can write it down, if you can speak it, if you can see it, you can do it. And so, yeah, I definitely see a lot of myself there, although not quite at the level of you for sure. But I think, for something that really stood out to me and was actually advice that my sister gave when I was kind of going through a period of burnout in my life, because, whether it was work or sports or diabetes, my sister told me this thing that I'll never forget. And it was the brightest candle burns out the fastest. And so sometimes you have to
mhm.
really be careful of what you're giving your energy to. Like you said, you can't give 100 to everything. But for people like us, that can feel uncomfortable not to like give 100% all the time to something. So a daily challenge for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So for those of us who are less familiar with some of the field events or who are track and field casuals, tell us about your event, the hammer throw, and like how do you prepare for meets and how do you, think about your diabetes management when it comes to competition?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I'll start with what hammer actually is. I know a lot of people might not know what it is. Basically, it's a heavy ball, like a shot put. It's 4 kilos or around 9 pounds for the Americans on a meter wire with a handle. And I basically spin around on the spot 4 times and try and throw it as far as I can. Like for reference, my best at the moment is 73.5 meters, which is around 240 feet. So yeah, that's my event. In terms of how diabetes plays a part in meets, it plays a big part. I think definitely the blood sugar levels, that's a big thing. If your bloods are too high, your bloods are too low. I'm trying to spin in circles and throw the furthest I've ever thrown before. It's not exactly a good combo. So managing that is like priority for competitions. I also know and have come to find that adrenaline makes your blood spike. And no matter what I do to try and prepare for that, to try stop it and control it, I can't. Without a doubt, my bloods are going to spike and then they're going to drop through in my competition. And so, yeah, that's just something I've had to accept and kind of learn how to deal with that on the fly. There's not a formula. There's no one way, no one size fits all. It just like, you got to just make that up on the spot. Once you've done everything you can to prepare, of course.
I've
Hammer,
actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
Well, I've heard from other track and field athletes, whether they're sprinters or they're jumpers, that meets are a real challenge because you're there all day. You may have a session or a heat in the morning, and then you wait a few hours, and then you have another one, and then you have to eat lunch or something like that, or you wait all day, and then your event is at the end. So, like the challenge is like managing the adrenaline spike, making sure you're fueling your body, making sure you're hydrated, so that you can perform well at a point in time that is sometimes like not structured, and you have to wait for other things to happen, and can be really challenging. Like how do you work through those?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess I'll first start with like, for me, morning competitions are so hard. I like tend to have a bit of a spike after the first meal of the day. And like, I have to make sure that I wake up, at least 3 hours before just to get over that spike so I can at least separate that spike from the adrenaline spike. So that's definitely a really big thing. I guess I just make sure I have all the different foods on hand. Like I have my bananas, I have my muesli bars, I have Powerade, just like liquid sugar, just to get it in fast, easy to drink through a competition. I think also for me, like usually I know what time my competition is. It's not too bad about waiting for some. I think only like the NCAA regional and national rounds that have actually kind of played with that too much. But for me, my competition is an hour long and or can be up to an hour long, but I only throw 6 times in that. So it's a lot of sitting down. And okay, that might sound good at first because you think, okay, cool, you have all this time to like manage your bloods, get it on like get on top of it if something happens. But I find I just like tend to absolutely micromanage it and fixate on it. And I'm trying to like just make sure I'm not too high, give myself insulin, or go low, give myself things. And that's like it just gets too much. And then you get in your head, like you start to doubt yourself because like you're going into that circle and like you know exactly what you are because you've had time to check it. And you're like, oh, I know I'm this high or this low or whatever I am. And that definitely plays into you mentally. So I've definitely learned that like you have to kind of accept, like you do everything you can, but then it gets to a point where you just have to accept that you've done everything you can, and then kind of just shift your mindset to like what's going right that day. Maybe your bloods are right that day, or like maybe your body feels really good. Like you just have to focus on those positives and take that into you, like into the circle when you throw or compete, whatever it is.
It's such a good like mirror for life with diabetes. Like it's compressed down to 1 hour, but there's so many lessons that can be applied whether you're throwing a hammer or not, right? Not fixating, staying relaxed, like staying in the moment, managing
For
things as
sure.
they come.
For sure.
So, this series is called Doing Well with Diabetes. You talked a little bit about competition, but how does diabetes show up in your day-to-day life as an athlete or as a student, or, going to the Olympics and preparing for, many weeks overseas? And what steps do you take to continue to do well with your career alongside your diabetes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess as a diabetic, like, your type one's always there. Like, it's always going to be there. It's not going anywhere. And I guess that can be something big on your shoulders sometimes. And I definitely know that sometimes I do get frustrated. If I'm having a bad day, I'm like, I don't want to deal with my diabetes right now. Like, I've already got enough that's going on in life. Or sometimes I get mad at it if it causes something negative in my life. If I'm like, have a bad session because my bloods are just out of control, or like I have to wake up and change my side in the middle of the night. I'm like, no, I'm tired. I just want to sleep. Like, of course, there's going to be those times. I feel like when I was younger as well, I mean, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Like, I definitely had a bit more of a negative focus towards diabetes. I honestly, there was times I hated it. I hated that it made me different. I hated that I had to be connected to an insulin pump all the time. I'm like, I just want to break. Like, I don't want to wear a CGM where people can see it. But I think the biggest step I've had in like transitioning to living with diabetes in like a more like a better way is to kind of shift this into a more positive light. Look at the things that diabetes has helped me. I think that being different can be good. I think we should be proud to be diabetic. I think that end of the day, what does it matter what someone else is thinking about me? That's not affecting me. And if they are thinking about me negatively and it causes anything, like I don't really need them in my life anyway. So I think putting my health first and putting our health first is like the most important thing. I also think that recently I've kind of stepped back and I've been able to see all the positive things diabetes has brought me, all the lessons it's taught me. Like, I matured at a very young age, and while yeah, maybe that did take away from some of the carefreeness of childhood. I think that it's turned me into the person I am today. I don't think I would have been able to do everything I have so far without diabetes. And as an athlete specifically, like watching out for your blood sugars, like it's made me way more in tune with my body and not just for my blood sugars, I can feel like when it's time to stop a session, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm putting myself at injury if I keep going, or really trying to focus on that quality instead of quantity from those body signals maybe a normal person wouldn't be able to kind of like perceive. So I think there's definitely a lot of positives. And I think this positive light has allowed me to do all these things, even with type 1.
I'd be interested in your perspective on that as a neuroscientist, because, I think you mentioned something that really resonated with me and I think about a lot, even when we're diagnosed very young and even younger than you in some cases. Diabetes forces you to have a relationship with your own mortality in a way that people who are not chronically ill or have maybe experienced a death in the family early in their life don't understand. And like being sick, positive or not, shuffles the deck and rearranges like how you think about priority in your life. And in recent years, I've come to the conclusion that, we're both, all of us on this call are on borrowed time. Like if we were born in any other time outside of the past 100 years, we may not be alive at this point. And so I feel very lucky and like able to contribute and find energy in that. But it does reframe and change you because you think about things differently. You didn't like chocolate as a kid or lollies or candy, like, which may sound really weird to a lot of people because it's like, kids love candy, but you had to like overcome that in order to survive and like learn that at a very young age to do things that are difficult in order to survive. And I wonder if you've ever considered that, like, as you have continued to do difficult and challenging things regarding diabetes, like how that's maybe created pathways for you to overcome adversity in other parts of your life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it kind of just shows what you're capable of and the way that you're capable of changing your mind when you're given a challenge. I think diabetes is a very extreme example. Like you're given these things that you have to do, and of course you have a choice whether to do them or not, but you don't really. Like you say, it's like kind of to survive, you have to do these things. It's your cards are kind of forced for you. And I think just that when you're given that and it forces you to do that, I think it makes it easier when you're given something else that may be a little bit more of a choice. But then you realize like how strong like the human body is, like what you can do with your mind. And I think that that definitely strengthens that for like future challenges for sure.
I
And maybe
totally
the
agree.
challenges that people might not even consider taking because we're like, okay, we've done this before. Okay, that's nothing compared to this. But not everyone has had that shift in mindset. So
Yeah, it's interesting, like how we don't really know how much we're capable of until we try and we try to go above and beyond ourselves. And the idea, like once you accomplish something, like your mind expands to the possibility that bigger things could happen. And I would encourage people listening to this who are living with diabetes and kind of have that thing in the back of their mind that keeps them from taking action or keeps them from trying something new. Sometimes that voice can protect you, but sometimes it's important for you to continue to try to think bigger and think differently about, what your life could be, if you live above and beyond that voice. This is kind of like related to this, but you talked a little bit earlier about, the good advice, like the only things that you can't do are three things, but what do you think is the best diabetes advice that you've been given? And then also, what's the worst advice?
yeah, I guess. I mean, there's a lot of good advice I've been given, but if I have to pick one, I'd probably say something that my mom actually told me. So I guess context to the story, I moved to college to the US from Australia when I was 17 by myself, didn't know anyone in the US. I didn't know how the healthcare system works. So I was like, obviously, that was a very steep learning curve and kind of threw me in the deep end there. On top of that, I went to Harvard University. The academics there are kind of crazy, pretty intense, on top of being a student athlete. So I just like had so much going on. I was super busy, super stressed. And I was like, there were times that maybe I didn't prioritize my diabetes as much as I should have. And it's not like I ever ignored it or did anything bad, but it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. My mom was always on top of me. She's like, no, you have to make diabetes a priority. It doesn't matter what's going on. Like your health comes first. Like it doesn't matter any commitment, like diabetes first. And so I say that's definitely like the biggest advice going forward. Because yeah, no, sometimes diabetes, it feels like this additional responsibility that we don't want to deal with. But end of the day, like if we don't deal with it, it's going to make us less productive anyway. So like, let's just deal with it. Like helps you feel better and be more productive anyway. So I think that's definitely the best advice. I'm
That
definitely
is
way better about that now, but like when you're in college and you're by yourself and you got everything going on, it can be easy. Like, and it wasn't even a conscious thing. It's just that shift, and then just like bringing it back to priority is so important.
I often say I'm so glad that there was no CGM share with my mom or care team when I was in college, because there would have been some questions for sure. That's so important what you're talking about, because and for me it was framed that way by my care team at diagnosis. So diabetes and my diabetes management was presented as this sort of gateway to whatever I wanted to do, and like gateway of my dreams. If I could manage my diabetes well, almost anything could be possible. And so, yeah, I mirror that back to you. It's excellent, excellent advice.
Yeah, and I guess the worst advice, I wouldn't necessarily say this was advice actually given to me, but I would definitely say it's probably a common perception of people with type 1 diabetes, is that like your bloods have to be perfect all the time. And I just think like that's not realistic. Like there is no way we're avoiding all highs, all lows. Like we're human. And I think like that can be a very dangerous mindset to have, is like striving for perfection with this. Like it's kind of similar to just life in general. It's just like you put all this stress and pressure on yourself to do this unrealistic thing, and it's just going to bring negativity when like you don't need that. So I think of course we want to control it as best as we can, but again, like perfection isn't realistic. And I guess good advice relating to that was like it's not necessarily about having a high or a low, but it's how much time you spend in that high range or in that low range. So like if you do happen to go high, like let's just try bring it down as soon as possible. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Uh, there's some of that in diabetes social media as well. It's like if you're seeing a chart that's always flat, or someone only sharing the high moments, like it's just a snapshot. We're human. There are highs and lows. And I think, again, you have to examine your relationship, like you were talking about, not hyper fixating on those moments, and not, just focusing on those, but to give yourself a little bit of room to be human. Do you
Yeah, for
have
sure.
do you have a favorite story about managing diabetes at a track meet or a practice or a road trip, or, traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I have a story. It's probably not, I mean, it's a good and bad story. It was a competition. I remember super clearly because I think that was the point that I kind of started to realize how important or how much diabetes could impact me as an athlete at this level. It was 2 years, it was like 2023 NCAA season. And basically, I had just broken 70 meters for the first time, which is like quite a big barrier in the hammer throw. And, I was going into another meet, and I just had like probably the best training session of my life the day before this meet. I was so excited, so ready to go. Like, I'm like, we're going to throw so big the next day. Anyway, I've woken up, I've had breakfast, and by the way, this was before I learned all the things I have to do as an athlete. So all the things I said earlier that I do now, I did not do those things. Like this is kind of the competition that started that learning process for me. So basically, I used to prioritize sleep before a competition for morning comps because I'm like, I need my sleep. Like it's too early. So I kind of wake up as late as I could. I would have breakfast, but I had a really bad breakfast spike this day. And I've gone to the meet, and then I've had my adrenaline spike, and I'm just like HI, like not even a number on my readings. It was just like right at the top of the limit, and it was not coming down. I was giving myself so much insulin, and it was just not changing. And I think the girls are out there warming up, and I was like, went to the bathroom, tried changing my site. I was like, what am I gonna do? Like this competition's about to start. Like I have to go. I don't have a choice. But I felt terrible. Like my head was just all over the place. So I've gone out there, course halfway through the competition, bloods come crashing down, start eating all those lollies, candy, and then they start coming up. So I was on a roller coaster ride. Definitely not a fun experience. And I remember after that comp, I was so upset because I was like, as an athlete, I felt so ready to perform that day. And then it just felt like, I mean, anything can happen on the day, but for me at the time, it felt like diabetes took that away from me. So that was definitely kind of the negative stuff. But I think from that, that was such an important competition for me, probably one of the most important in my life, because it made me realize like all the things I was going to have to do as a type 1 diabetic athlete. So it really helped me kind of develop these competition routines, all these little things I have to do the day before a comp, on the day of the comp, and really just be prepared for that. And I think I also spoke about it earlier. It's not just preparing for it, but it's also accepting. It's accepting that our bloods aren't going to be perfect. We can't always control what our bloods are going to be going into a competition. So accepting that what happens happens, and just working with it on the fly once you get to a point.
I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things that I've noticed as a characteristic of people who are, living well with diabetes is the growth mindset. And you took this situation that was a negative or a difficult situation and use it as an opportunity to learn and to grow and improve. And I think that's so essential for anyone living with diabetes, because especially if you're an athlete, you're going to encounter situations where your sight your sight fails, or your sensor falls off, or you're experiencing, you react to food differently, or you didn't get enough sleep on a road trip and you have to, have a competition the next day. And it's all about how you respond to that. And that can inform, like you said, you prepare totally different for meets now because of this moment. So if you didn't have that adversity, you wouldn't be more prepared now. But in the moment, it's hard to see that. So yeah, I think that's just so essential for people, especially young people who have a dream with diabetes, and you encounter a difficulty or a low moment. That's okay. Like everybody, even Olympians and, Harvard graduates and NCAA champions with diabetes have encountered those low moments.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, are you ready for the rapid fire questions? We've reached the quick response part of the interview.
I guess so.
All right. Well, you're in the hot seat. So I know you talked earlier about like not really loving candy or chocolate. So this will be funny. So what's your favorite hypo snack?
Sour Patch Kids, not
What?
sour worms anymore.
Oh, okay. So you graduated from Sour Worms to Sour Patch Kids.
Yes, we did.
That's important. All right. Favorite thing to do on an off day?
Spend time outside, whatever that is.
Favorite memory from the Olympics?
Oh, 100%. Like the competition itself, like competing in front of that crowd was insane.
Who's your favorite athlete?
Sally Pearson, not an athlete anymore, but growing up she was.
What are you currently listening to?
Old version of Taylor Swift. So like the first albums.
The deep cuts. I love it. Are you a homebody or adrenaline junkie?
Oh, 1,000% adrenaline junkie. Like anything with adrenaline, I'm there.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Sorry, cat at home.
Pump or MDI?
Pump for sure.
And what therapy are you currently wearing?
I'm wearing a pump. I was only on manual injections for less than a year when I was diagnosed, and a pump ever since. So
And what pump do you wear?
Tandem T Slim at the moment. So
Okay, and last one, movies or TV show?
definitely TV shows. I'm way too indecisive for movies. So
I love it. Okay, well, as we kind of reach the end of the interview, I do want to go back to something that's really important that we talked about at the beginning, which is, you have been an athlete most of your life, but only recently have you really decided to tell your story and connect more on the type 1 diabetes side. So what do you think was the catalyst that kind of opened you up to sharing your story with diabetes more publicly?
I honestly think it was becoming more confident in myself as a person. I think growing up, especially as a girl, a female athlete, I do hammer throw, so I'm a thrower. There's a lot of stereotypes that come with that as well. Certain body image. I think the body image stuff is definitely portrayed like so strongly in social media these days. And I know, I mean, they're trying to make a shift, but growing up in that, it's hard. And I think only recently I found confidence in who I am, and who I am is who I am, and I'm proud of that. And I think kind of diabetes came in that acceptance. I think also just hearing the impact that I was having on some people, like being a type 1 diabetic and doing the things I have done, I think that really kind of made me realize I'm like, oh, wow, I can help people. And I think I said earlier too, like if I can just help one other person, then it was worth sharing my story. So, yeah.
That was actually the entire reason I wanted to start the podcast, is to help one person. So I relate to that a ton. For people who are listening and they want to get connected with you and follow your journey, what's the best way to do that?
Uh, Instagram for sure. That's what I'm most active on. So, yeah, it's Steph.Ratcliffe, I think.
Perfect. And we'll include and tag you like in the show notes. So we'll make sure that the links are right. So much for joining us with this series in collaboration with the International Diabetes Association, International Diabetes Federation. And thank you so much for being a great example for people everywhere about doing well with diabetes. I really appreciate your time today.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Doing Well with Diabetes is a series interviewing athletes living with diabetes from around the globe to help inspire the next generation of athletes with diabetes to continue to work towards their dreams while doing well with diabetes. Doing Well with Diabetes is part of the Kids and Diabetes in Schools program from the International Diabetes Federation and is supported by Sanofi and ISBAD. Diabetics Doing Things has donated all production and promotion in kind. To learn more about the Kids program, visit kids.idf.org. And to hear more from Diabetics Doing Things, visit diabeticsdoingthings.com/subscribe.